Okie dokie, so it is now 3:28 a.m. on Monday, April 17th, and yes, I am still dressed. Once again, this is I made a video a couple hours ago, but it didn't quite pan out thing, so I'm remaking it. Again, I never know why I tell you that, hey, I'm remaking this video that I'm never going to show you, but apparently this is another one of those things. So, I mentioned in my last video that my granny mentioned a Nancy. If you're just coming across this and you don't want to watch my previous video, I understand totally, because my videos this year are just me rambling and whatever else. So, okay, let's see if I can do this. So anyhow, my granny and I have been working on one of those all about my grandma books that I had in my car and did not think to bring in here to show you. But you know, it's one of those books that you get your kid to fill out about their grandma to get them into genealogy and whatnot. I forget where we got it, but I found it in our basement. So I'm like, oh hey, I can bring this to my granny for us to talk about something while I'm helping take care of her while my grandparents are at the beach. They're coming home tomorrow. Because I did not inherit my grand's gift of conversation. Like, that side of the family can talk to anyone. I can't think to ask you about the weather. I got nothing. So, okay, I can bring this. We have something to talk about. So, like, it got to the point in the books where it starts asking about their family growing up and whatnot. So, my granny is 92, and little side note, so, my granny is, my mom was raised by her first, just a little background, my mom was raised by her first cousin, so biologically, my gran is my first cousin once removed, but she raised my mom and then she raised me, so I consider her my gran. And then my gran's mom, my granny, is my biological great aunt. And so my granny's dad is my great grandpa. So okay. So I mean, I am blood related to them, just not how I say I am in daily life. How I say I am in daily life. Okay. And I don't go through the whole spiel when I'm talking to people. I'm just like, yeah, this is my gran, this is my granny, or whatever. I'm their great-granddaughter, great-granddaughter, and we'll just go with that because they don't need to know. But I'm doing this for genealogy purposes, so yeah. Okay. So my granny is 92, and she is the last of her family, so she is my only source of information for this type of thing, besides the internet and my cat ones. And of course, I start talking, making videos, I've got to get up and move around a lot. And where am I looking again? Come on. Come on. Here. Yeah. Okay, so anyhow, my granny is a smith, so anyhow, and we want back out, because of course we want back out. Bowl full of food. Okay. Side note, he is not hungry. He has a whole entire bowl full of food. He has 2 bowls full of food. So anyhow. So, my granny is the last of her immediate family. There were 7 or 8 of them. She had 7 or 8 brothers and sisters. I forget. I think 7 brothers and sisters. And they were from Georgia. They moved here to North Carolina when she was 2. So my granny obviously doesn't remember much, if anything, about Georgia. But apparently, she does remember some things about what her family told her about their family growing up. And apparently, my great-grandfather, Parker Smith, he had a sister who died when she was young. And she is the point of this video. So, my great-grandfather, James Parker, was born in about, cat, I swear to God, 1884, I think. Somewhere between 1884 and 1885. Like a Jack in the Box. You want in? Where did you go? You want in or out? Where you at? Out? Okay. Oh, Lordy. Yeah. Vlogging with Cat. So, James Parker, or Grandpa Smith, as my gran called him, and I'm going to refer to him, was born the same day I was. What the heck was that? Okay, so I'm not going to say which day, but he was born the same day I was, either 100 or 99 years to the day that I was born. Different records say different things. His tombstone has 1884, so we're gonna go with that, and that would have meant he was born 99 years to the day that I was, or I was born 99 years to the anyhow. And so I've got that. And Parker had a brother. We'll use his first name, William, who was born, according to my records, in 1886. So, yeah. And so I knew that, but for a while I thought William's name was Walter. I remember hearing Walter Smith this and Walter Smith that, and I have no idea where they got Walter from, because I know for a fact people called him Walter. But all the records I found when I finally figured it out were William. So that's part of why it took me forever to find William and not Walter. Yay, personal Mandela effect. Maybe that's a personal Mandela effect. I have no idea, but I really don't care. But it was through him that I found their parents' names. Asa and Margaret. And I'm not going to say her last name, but so yeah, I can. That's decent enough. I can work with that. So I knew about them, in my genealogy. Most of my genealogy was from the internet, because most of my family didn't know much. But anyhow, so I am taking forever to get to the point. But I'm sorry. This is a lot better than the last video, so we're keeping it. I remember years and years ago, like 10 years ago, back when my granny was still able to live in her own home. Yeah, she was like maybe in her 80s. I asked her about her family and what she remembered, and she mentioned that her dad had a sister, Nancy, who died young, and that was all she knew at the time. So for years, all I had was that there was a Nancy Smith who lived sometime in like the 1880s, 1890s, somewhere in there, who died young. I did not know what died young meant. Because when you're 80, in your 80s, young can be like me in my 30s. So, I didn't know if this Nancy died when she was a baby, a toddler, a little kid, 12, 16, in her early 20s. I had no earthly idea. So, I've been looking for this Nancy forever in the census records and anything else I can find. It's hard enough to find Smith, but I figured with, the Asa, the Margaret, or Polly, whichever, Parker, William, I could find the family. Never found her. She is not in the census records at all. So anyhow, with the book that I was working on, I'm like, so what do you remember? I asked my granny, so what do you remember about Grandpa Smith's family? And she mentioned, his brother William and blah blah blah, and they had a sister. And I'm like, well, do you remember what her name was? I think I remember you mentioning it like a while back. Do you remember what it was? And she's like, yeah, it was Nancy. I'm like, okay, so clearly there was a Nancy, because I didn't want to prompt her to saying Nancy in case it triggered some other memory and she got confused or something. I don't know. She doesn't have Alzheimer's, but she has moments where she forgets that certain people are deceased and have been for decades. So her mind is fairly sharp for 92, but she does have her moments. So I didn't want to. Yeah, I wanted to make sure it was as close to fact as I could get, or that she, because this Nancy would have died long before she was born. Anyhow, so I'm trying to figure out a date to when Nancy existed. I did learn she was buried in a cemetery somewhere in Georgia. That's incredibly helpful. Um, so for my research, they lived in Madison County, Georgia. Like James Parker and his parents and all that. So what I have managed to gather is that Margaret, my great great grandmother, was married before she met Asa. She had a son when she was 15 or somewhere in there. And then, so in the 1880 census, Margaret is listed as 21 with her son John, age 6. So she was not married to Asa in 1880, at least not when the census was taken. So combine that with my great grandpa was born roughly 1883, 1884. They would have had to gotten married in the early 1880s, like 18. I want to say somewhere between 1880, like mid to late 1880, and like 1882 or 3, somewhere in there. And then in the 1900 census, I found Parker Smith, age 15, living as an employee with another family. So I'm thinking maybe something happened to them around like before the 1900s. I don't know, so I'm thinking that Nancy would have had to been born at some like the very early 1800s or around 1890s. And so she was never in the census records, and so there would have been no record of her. And that got me to kind of thinking, what about all the other children and people and relatives of ours that were born and died between the census records? There would be no record of them. How many relatives are we missing out on because they lived and died between the census records? Just something to think about.